In the book of Deuteronomy, Moses begins by recounting the history of the Israelites as they have come through the wilderness, spending 40 years in the wilderness. Why? Because they had not had the faith to enter the land when God told them to. And so the generation of soldiers that refused to enter died in the wilderness, but God had raised up their sons in their place. And so the nation is as strong now as it was when they came out of Egypt, but with a new generation of people. And when it was time for them to move into the land, they were instructed not to harass the Edomites, the descendants of Esau, their relatives, and God had given Mount Seir to Esau, and not to challenge Moab and the children of Ammon. God had given them their territory. Indeed, these people had done God's work in expelling the giants who formerly lived in that territory. But God has told Moses that the children of Israel are to displace the Amorites, who live in the northern part of that region east of Jordan. God directed Moses to come via his territory. So Moses sent messengers from the wilderness of Kedemoth to Sihon king of Heshbon with words of peace, saying, "Let us pass through your land. I will keep strictly to the road, and will turn neither to the right nor to the left. You shall sell me food for money, that I may eat, and give me water for money, that I may drink. Only let me pass through on foot, just as the descendants of Esau who dwell in Seir, and the Moabites who dwell in Ar, did for me, until I cross the Jordan to the land which the Lord our God is giving us." But Sihon, king of Heshbon, would not let us pass through. For the Lord your God hardened his spirit and made his heart obstinate, that he might deliver him into your hand, as it is this day. And the Lord said to me, "See, I have begun to give Sihon and his land over to you. Begin to possess it, that you may inherit his land." Then Sihon and all his people came out against us to fight at Jahaz, and the Lord our God delivered them over to us. So we defeated him, his sons, and all his people. We took all his cities at that time, and we utterly destroyed the men, the women, and little ones of every city. We left none remaining. We took only the livestock as plunder for ourselves, with the spoil of the cities that we took. From Arior, which is on the bank of the river Arnon, and from the city which is in the ravine as far as Gilead, there was not one city too strong for us. The Lord our God delivered all to us. Only you do not go near the land of the people of Ammon, anywhere along the river Jabbok, or to the cities of the mountains, or wherever the Lord had forbidden us. My name's Arthur, and I thank you for joining me as we share these things together. The approach that Moses took was to ask for permission to pass through the land of Sihon, king of Heshbon. He would pass through till they came to the Jordan River, which they would cross to occupy the land of Canaan. They are doing this at the Lord's command, and Moses plainly states to Sihon, it is the land that the Lord is giving to us. So does Sihon know the Lord God, the God of the Hebrews? Of course he does. It's less than 1,000 years since the flood. These people knew of the flood and the events of the flood. They knew of the God of heaven, but they had evidently not walked in the ways of the God of heaven. They obviously knew about the children of Israel. They had been in the wilderness not very far away for the last 40 years, and they knew what they stood for. They knew what had happened in Egypt 40 years earlier, when the Egyptians resisted them. And so the coming of the children of Israel was something that they had expected and anticipated and indeed prepared for. So the whole region would have known the purpose for which God brought the children of Israel out of Egypt. And they had plenty of time to make up their mind whether they would to work with God and support the Israelites, or work against God and resist them. And Sihon decided to resist them. This was the land God had promised to Abraham Indeed, we noticed in chapter 1 that the total territory assigned to Israel was indeed quite large, along the coast running from the river of Egypt to the Euphrates River. Sihon brought his army against Moses, and so the children of Israel had to fight them, and they were able to defeat them. It's in fact a common pattern in the scriptures that when God's people seek to do something, God's enemies rise up against them and try and thwart them. But God gives victory to his children, and they are the ones who are successful, and in this way the enemies are weakened and destroyed, that all people might know that the God of Israel is indeed the Lord God, and what he says stands. This is what happened in Egypt, when Pharaoh took his stand against Moses and Aaron, and said, "I don't know the Lord God." Well, in the end he had to acknowledge the Lord God, who was sovereign over all aspects in the agricultural economy of Egypt. And so God gave power to the children of Israel to overcome Sihon, though he had many great walled cities and was very strong. But God is always stronger. But God had specified which territory they could attack, and that they were to leave Ammon and Moab alone. And so they did. We can continue reading in Deuteronomy chapter 3. Then we turned and went up on the road to Bashan, and Og, king of Bashan, came out against us, he and all his people, to battle at Edrei. And the Lord said to me, "Do not fear him, for I have delivered him and all his people and his land into your hand. And you shall do to him as you did to Sihon, king of the Amorites, who dwell at Heshbon." So the Lord our God also delivered into our hands Og, king of Bashan, with all his people, and we attacked him until he had no survivors remaining. And we took all his cities at that time. There was not a city which we did not take from them. 60 cities, all the region of Argob, the kingdom of Og in Bashan. All these cities were fortified with high walls, gates, and bars, besides a great many rural towns. And we utterly destroyed them, as we did to Sihon, king of Heshbon, utterly destroying the men, the women, and children of every city. But all the livestock and the spoil of the cities we took as booty for ourselves. And at that time we took the land from the hand of the 2 kings of the Amorites, who were on this side of the Jordan, from the river Arnon to Mount Hermon. The Sidonians call it Mount Sirion, and the Amorites call it Senir. All the cities of the plain, all Gilead, and all Bashan, as far as Salcah and Edrei, cities of the kingdom of Og in Bashan. For only Og, king of Bashan, remained of the remnant of the giants. Indeed, his bedstead was an iron bedstead. Is it not in Rabbah of the people of Ammon? 9 cubits is its length, and 4 cubits its width, according to the standard cubit. Og, king of Bashan, was another king of the Amorites. He also rose up to attack Israel, thinking he could do what the Egyptians had failed to do, and what Sihon, king of Heshbon, had failed to do. Notice also that Og, king of Bashan, was one of the giants. His bed is a single bed, as big as 2 queen beds. This was a huge man, but God was not with him when he resisted the children of Israel, and they also were defeated. The Lord God, as sovereign over the universe, determines which peoples live in which places and for how long, and in due course brings renewal to them and judgment upon them. The Israelites were now being given the land of Canaan, because the wickedness of Canaan was complete. And we can be sure that the judgment on the king of the Amorites was because they had turned against God, which is evidenced by the way they responded to the children of Israel.